Health webinar series. We're very excited today to be joined by Dr. Donna Potter, who will be speaking on the Christian principles of recovery. Today we'd like to share with you a little information about Lakeview Health. Lakeview believes that complete health, wellness, and life balance are a reality for everyone. We believe that people can change to become life-saving and not life-draining, and that by creating a path that leads toward finding your true north, the greatest rewards can be gained. We support a belief of servant leadership, which is a culture that empowers our staff to act as a tool for families and individuals struggling with chaos and pain. We offer a program that's safe and built on a holistic approach that addresses the medical, psychological, spiritual, and physical needs of our patients, creating a warm and inviting campus that welcomes and accepts everyone, no matter where they are in their life. We are a residential adult treatment program treating individuals 18 and over with substance abuse and mental health disorders located in Jacksonville, Florida. If you're interested in learning more about Lakeview, we invite you to visit us at lakeviewhealth.com. Or if you know someone who needs treatment right away, we invite you to contact us at 866-460-8416. Before we begin our webinar today, I'd like to just remind you of a few housekeeping top tips. Please be sure to complete the online evaluation form in order to receive your certificate of completion. Our contact hours are approved through CE Broker, and the evaluations are necessary in order to receive your certificate. There should be an automatic email evaluation that will populate after you complete the webinar today. If for whatever reason you don't receive that email, feel free to reach us at jcream@lakeviewhealth.com, and we'll be happy to troubleshoot any issues that you may have with that. Additionally, we will be sending out the certificates either by snail mail or email based on what your preference is. And again, today's workshop is on Christian principles in recovery, so we're very excited to have Dr. Donna Potter. Dr. Potter studied while in Boston and returned to New York to begin her practice in 2000. Her focus in organizational growth has spurred her to become the president of In His Name Outreach, a nonprofit organization currently located in Buffalo, New York. With technology, she is breaking geographical boundaries, serving clients across the world from Alaska to Afghanistan. One of her passionate areas is addiction recovery. She is a speaker at state and national church conferences on this and other stirring motivational topics. She sits on the board of Addiction Conquerors and has received the Michael Sela Award for her outstanding service. She is a Christian with a 25-year walk discovering the journey of faith and its application. So with that, I'm going to turn this presentation over to Dr. Potter.
Well, greetings to Lakeview staff, affiliates, and our friends from In His Name Outreach. As Gina was so beautifully and eloquently put there, I am a biblical counselor and president of In His Name Outreach. And we actually affectionately call ourselves I Know. And we are a charitable nonprofit. We've grown from a small one-person office to a place where people are pouring in to be a part of an exciting vision into the fight against addiction and pathways to all kinds of recovery. So every day it is exciting to see what God wants to do with us. And we're stepping up to the plate and training New York State recovery life coaches to increase the number of warriors in this battle. We're a resource center, and people around the country are contacting with their questions, and we're helping them to find answers, whether through us or through collaborations such as Lakeview Health and other valued resources. Well, we do offer education through programs, seminars, counseling, coaching, and we find their smiles in the daily transformations we see. I am so blessed to work alongside loving, talented, dedicated folks in this war on addiction. Well, my personal background comes into play because I also am an ACOA. And as a child, I followed my father from meeting to meeting, picking up donuts along the way. And I was a daddy's girl. I sat in the back of the meeting as quiet as possible, listening daily to a speaker share their struggles with alcohol like my dad. When I got to be a teen, I was taken from those meetings and placed into ALEC team. And as I graduated high school, I, like many other women, married someone who was just like my dad, but didn't seem to be as violent due to the dope he was smoking daily and the recreational drugs. Before I knew it, I had also become a drug dealer. A baby on the horizon and choices to be made, I took my son and escaped as I joined NA and tried to reestablish some sort of sanity, to be a good, clean mom and protect my son to the best of my ability. I still fought internal demons as I tried to free myself from that life. And on February 16th of '89, I found the source to all my recovery. It's been an amazing 26-year walk through faith, and over the last 15, I have devoted myself to become a light in the darkness of addiction and was asked to sit on the board of Addiction Conquerors. Well, facilitation of recovery groups and my professional walk through biblical counseling puts me into an amazing place to share my experiences, faith, and hope. Our tagline at I Know is applying biblical principles to everyday life, and it is a pleasure to share some of those with you today. I've come to love the identification and application of spiritual principles and putting them into recovery, which prompts a healthy lifestyle change. You know, the founders of AA felt the same way, and they based their program around those principles too. Time has evolved the program and introduced alternative ways of thinking, and I can respect that, but personally prefer to take you back to the original thought processes around the spiritual principles of recovery. If you're not from a spiritual background, you might have wondered, why do we need spiritual principles at all? Well, what does a recovery program that includes spiritual principles have going for it? And does it really make a difference? Well, what we follow in regards to our faith may define the obstacles we face in our recovery. To place faith into an idol, you know, that feel-good counterfeit thing, instead of God, of the Bible, we may set ourselves up for failure. Please don't misinterpret my respect for programs that take us to a place of spiritual awakening that do not make reference to the one true God of the Bible. I'm only, for all intents and purposes, supposing that it is the beginning of the spiritual awakening from where I will begin. The Bible then tells us how to deal with our new awareness and how to turn it into a force for good. When giving self to those little gods, we call them little g gods, are referenced as idols, we realize that we are what we worship by trying to achieve those things we place value on. Worshiping those little gods as opposed to the one big God, it can make the difference between success or failure in our self-worth and ultimately our recovery. Years back, I was introduced to a concept called boundaries and became adept at applying those new concepts developed by Drs. Cloud and Townsend. These responsibilities about myself, that I was the keeper of these, was as foreign as if you would have told me that I was made of cheese instead of mostly water. My experience was that the pages I pulled up identified clearly that I was responsible for only myself and those parts that were me. God says in Galatians to carry my daily load. Well, if God made me with respect, then I was to give him respect, and it would create my very first healthy relationship. I then could turn that to the outside of myself into relationships around me. And I had to let go of the walls I built from disappointments, hurts, angers, all of those things, fear, worry. I had to learn how to come past the walls I created as a coping mechanism. You know, when you're a kid and you're in the middle of a snowball fight, the first thing you're going to do is find something to hide behind to protect yourself. Well, what starts to happen is, as we become adults, we do the same thing, except we do it emotionally. And we hide behind the walls that we start to build. And eventually, we become unable to communicate. I can't get me out. I get lonely and isolated. So I reach for that substance or that behavior that soothes that loneliness, pain, and guilt, and I pull it up behind my wall to hide it and the shame that comes with it. I had to create a better system that would allow the wall to come down and create a filter system that I could learn to control that would give me freedom to begin to see things for what they really were. I had to dismantle the wall one brick at a time until I allowed Jesus to come in and do the rest of the demolition. I learned to become responsible for my thoughts, attitudes, opinions, beliefs, needs, choices, feelings, values, time, possessions, money, talents, gifts, behavior, and my own body. To become responsible for another's boundaries with the exception other than a child below the age of accountability, I think New York State still says 21 here. It begins to wreak havoc into relationships because if I'm in your stuff, I'm not taking care of my own. And it is particularly hard here when you've been a victim along the way. Each of these responsibility categories was like a wrapped gift, each one individual. I began to open each one. I just think for a moment about my thoughts, and at that point in my life I wasn't even sure what it was I was thinking, or my attitude. Did I walk around with a negative or a positive one? Well, you know, as I continued on watching the impact it played on my life, first into relationship with myself, second, my family of origin, and last, expanding my reach beyond through my world and those others that I had involved in it. And each had a very profound effect personally. And then as I grew professionally, it began to impact there as well, and this underlying concept will set the stage for all to come. So my objectives are illuminating the simplicity of Christianity, understanding the conflict within myself, analyzing the relationship between behavior and belief, solutions to overcoming the challenges of Christian recovery, and planning a personal pathway to recovery success. So, in illuminating the simplicity of Christianity, as I started through the steps, I admitted that powerlessness over addiction. That point that we come to our lives and our clients and patients come to their lives to understand that there's an unmanageability, an admittance, actually coming forward to the truth, to concede it is true, acknowledgement of truth about our own personal, in-your-face powerlessness over addiction and the unmanageable life that we've created. Christianity is about a relationship with Jesus Christ, and all that Jesus asked of his disciples was to follow me. It was a rather simple request that defined and reshaped all of their lives. In a church, you find a doctrine and how particular churches run their churches, but Christ didn't have any of that because he was a new implementation or sacrifice that covers sin. He became grace. Well, why do I need it? It falls in the realm of free will. Free and independent choice, a voluntary decision. It is a culmination of our gifts of responsibility and what we do with them that transitions into the measurement of love that we give back to God. We begin to see the dynamics of free will in the paradigm of the secular and the Christian views. The paradigm meaning worldview underlying the theories and methodologies of a particular scientific subject, this subject being recovery. So how do these views affect us through the messages they give? I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible and call them worldview and Christian view. You each can replace this message as you see fit or customize it to your own scenario. Worldview. In my practice, I hear the repeated, rather selfish message, you are entitled to anything you want. The world entitled does not lend itself easily to good ethics, and you're judged on how you look and your production as to what you do. But when it comes to Christian view, we realize that all have fallen short of the glory of God. Humility exemplified. No one is better than anyone else. It's selfless, service-oriented, or kind of a servanthood. It's not about what you do, but who you are. And the theory behind it is an acrostic, is joy. J for Jesus, O for others, and Y for yourself. Well, my second objective, is to identify spiritual principles of Christian recovery and the relationship between behaviors and beliefs. It's no wonder that these views conflict on a regular basis, and it's difficult to try to live in both of those worlds at the same time. We all get to pick and choose what we will believe. And it will have a huge impact as to how we see and operate in the world around us. We all create our own worlds, our very own environments. We're constantly in a developmental stage, and our past create involuntary reflect actions, seeing something and reacting to it continually and voluntarily. Take, for instance, there was a good analogy I've seen recently on one of the scientific shows. It was great. There was a person holding a small dog over a kitchen sink that had some water in it, and the dog began to paddle, anticipating the water below. Well, as the dog was moved away from the sink and placed over a glass of water, he still continued to paddle. And if that wasn't enough, they moved him from the glass of water over a little shot glass of water, and he still continued to paddle. We all can have a tendency to reproduce the same behavior. I trust it would not be over a shot glass of water, though. We apply the principle to many things in our lives. To accommodate our internal, external environments that we created, we start to function in that place between behaviors and beliefs. When you take boundaries and then ask yourself how guilt, shame, and fear affect how you utilize them, you will come up with all kinds of distortions. Scripture says, during a reflective time, as Jesus was with the disciples, those that followed him, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me, in John 14:6. He knew we would struggle and that we'd need a Savior from whatever separated us from ourselves and God. Without this, we would never have the ability to see past that veil of denial about us, our lives, and relationships to the world of our choosing. It opens the ability to the spiritual principle right in step one, which is honesty. It is what allows us to see the relationship between our behavior and our beliefs. So let me share with you what I found over the years about belief systems. I had opportunity to meet Dr. Henry Cloud, and in a conversation, we discussed some of the results of the test I was personally conducting. I shared how I had been adding boundaries into all of my clients and watching interesting reactions and awareness of self-identity. Most of my clients could identify their responsibility regarding behavior and knowing right from wrong, yet they could not tell me simple things that they believed about themselves. Because we are triune in being, fashioned after our Creator, the spiritual part of us should be the priority, followed by the emotional, and then the physical. Well, the world flips it and places the smallest part of the pie to the spiritual instead of cutting the pieces into the thirds. The physical is largest, followed by emotional and trailing with the spirit of a person. We then don't have enough internal resources to be able to use a simple word like no. And without no, we cannot function in safety and freedom. I became aware that we each had two totally different belief systems, both vying to be number one. The first being our spiritual beliefs, which I respect highly in any individual with utmost respect and a non-judgmental ear. I have a small stone on my desk that has the saying, "He who is without sin casts the first stone." Oh, we throw no stones here in the office. God never gave me the job of judging, nor do I want the responsibility. Jesus saves, Jesus judges, and that works for me. Spirituality is a very intimate part of us, and it can be injured just like our feelings. It's highly valued, and it should be treated as gold. Because I have much to share today regarding spiritual principles and application through the steps at this juncture, I'd like to discuss the second belief system more in depth. It is what we believe about ourselves. It is the part of us that forms our self-esteem and helps us emotionally manage the world around us. As self-awareness is conscious knowledge of one's own character, beliefs, motives, and desires, an overwhelming challenge develops. Due to an addict's breakdown in this area, self-awareness is impeded by the belief that the coveted idol, whether substance or desire, affects motive, choices, feelings, attitudes. And it slows down any positive beliefs about one's self. When a person has no ability to hold oneself up any longer, it prompts us to go back. We have to go back to the spiritual part to find rest and hope. Fragmented pieces of ourselves need spiritual support, and we find those through Bible studies, prayer, Christ-based 12-step programs. When there is no spiritual support system, it increases our chances of failure in our programs. So spiritual recovery programs are quite popular, and I love that Lakeview Health has that faith-based component. And I'm aware that I'm sure it can continue to grow. In one study, National Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse at Columbia found that 79% of Americans believe that faith is able to help addicted people recover from their addictions. And that study also found that recovered individuals, defined as individuals who are sober over 2 years, they had greater levels of faith than those who fell into relapse after completing an addiction recovery program. And these statistics show the combination of spiritual faith and recovery, that it really is effective. I was distraught after attending an NA meeting one day. I'm sure you all remember the singer Rick James. He was part of the meeting that day, and in that program, he really didn't give any power in himself to what God was doing. Yet it was only a short time later that he would die from an overdose. But programs like Addiction Conquerors, Warrior Centers, and faith-based programs claims that drug addiction has the potential to destroy lives, but there's hope in a faith-based recovery program to rebuild life. And faith-based programs are able to provide those battling with addictions necessary tools to restore physical and emotional health and spiritual well-being. One of my favorite hymns is that "It is well with my soul." This is why faith-based recovery programs have a higher rate of success than that of traditional particular drug treatment programs. We all understand that addiction is a disease, but it's not just physical. It's a disease of the heart and soul, a heart condition. And finding faith can be the powerful catalyst in building and rebuilding physical, mental, and spiritual health. Well, it takes me to understanding the conflict within self. Challenges of Christian recovery versus the worldview of do what you want, you are entitled, is the concept of letting go of idols. What a challenge. And spiritual principles really do make a difference. That's why we follow those 12 steps, because we had to come to believe, and it's assuming that I did, that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, to accept something is true, and to bring it back to its original state. Now, if someone were always living in a world that's always been drama and chaos, they may need some professional help to start fresh. I call it a do-over moment. And sometimes on the back of somebody's file, I'll put a little circle and I'll put it on the desk, and we both hit that do-over button to begin new. Just as when a non-believer makes a choice to believe in Jesus spiritually. Restoring what? Life's cherished sanity. It was a power greater than myself that took me in the past into those places of addiction and the things that I saw around. And now I see that we do not, in Ephesians 6:12, wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities. When I stop and think about principalities, there's those kind of principles also. And the rest of the sentence says, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. So the spiritual principle here is hope. Just the same as fear, confusion, worry, shame, guilt, and others, they travel all together to gain a negative momentum in a person's life. Well, hope, faith, gratitude, and love, they'll create the same momentum, but in a positive place. Most challenging concepts, I guess, in my experience with self and others, was at that point that made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood them. Because there's some real spiritual principles there. We live a whole life for one defining moment. When we turn ourselves over to Christ. One decision in the sea of everyday decisions. To turn your will over, to stop doing things your way. Giving myself, yourself, permission to let go of preconceived ideas and experience freedom in release. Wow. Really letting go. The spiritual principle in step 3, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Well, faith is believing in things not seen and hoping always for the best. For anyone looking for biblical reference, it's in Hebrews 11. It's the great faith chapter. Hope draws in and creates a union with the principles of gratitude, solidifying that every day is a gift, holding a new adventure, prepared with everything that equips us to do what God has called us to do right now, being present in the moment and not projecting ourselves into our addiction or distractions of choice. I have a client that's been making some real good healthy strides in this area. And the other day during one of our group meetings, I had asked the question, just what was one thing that you're thankful for? And as it went around the circle and it landed on him, his response was, well, I dropped my son off at a soccer practice the other day. And as my son stepped away from the truck, he stopped and he turned around and he smiled at me. His dad was brought to tears because on a normal day of the past, he would have dropped him and started to project into work or lust or anything other. He would not have stopped long enough to catch his son's smile. He would have selfishly dropped and run. Well, many of you are in the service of responding to alcohol and drug addiction and others, yet fighting addictions of our own, like everyday ice cream, 2 kind of pieces of cake kind of day to relieve stress, people pleasing to boost our own self-worth, workaholism to gain status, and the list goes on and on. We're out there trying to fight a battle, and sometimes the battle is right within. And trying to face those idols on our own as a solution finds us hopeless, and our faith in a place of spiritual bankruptcy. Well, step 4, we're prompted to make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Fearless. To be brave and courageous without apprehension. Brave, having had or showing courage. Be brave and courageous about what? About taking a good look inside ourselves and making changes. Learning about our own personal operating system. Spiritual principle in this step, courage. To change those things I can change. To evaluate and reevaluate. To build and to rebuild. To step up and do something. I love Joshua 1:9. It says, be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. It allows us and gives us the courage to look at our part. No matter how bad it looks, we aren't alone in it. Well, let me share for a moment a snippet of one of my favorite movies to reiterate this. I'm sure that many of you have probably seen Evan Almighty. Steve Carell played Evan Baxter, who morphs into a current-day Noah. His wife, Joan, played by Lauren Graham. And I love Morgan Freeman as God. The scene takes place in a restaurant with Joan and the kids sitting at a table. They're finishing a meal, and the kids excuse themselves to go play video games and go to the restroom. And Joan's sitting there. She's looking at the news broadcast, which is making her husband look like a maniac. God's clearing and wiping the tables, and he looks over and he asks her, how's she doing? And gazing up at the TV on the wall, she says, what do you do with that? And God says, oh, I love that story about Noah 2 by 2 and all. He says, well, if you pray for patience, does God give you patience or the opportunity to be patient? Remember what he said next? If you ask for courage, does he give you courage or the opportunity to be courageous? So that means that we need to start finding solutions to overcoming the challenges of Christian recovery. Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Exact nature. Who are we when nobody's looking? Do we talk the talk or just walk the walk? We get to see the measurement of the personal progress that we're making as we're giving back into God, ourselves, and our recovery here. It's in the application of the spiritual principle of integrity. Because once integrity is established, we move into step 6, where we became entirely ready to have God remove all those defects of character. Man, oh man, having no element or part left out, to the full extent being open to new beginnings and necessary endings. You know how sometimes you know that something has to end, yet you sit there and you close your eyes and you just wish it keep continuing. ready to become something else. When is a liar not a liar, or a thief not a thief? It's not when they stop the behavior. It's when they choose to become something different than what they are. It's letting go of our old behaviors and our old beliefs, both arenas which overlap constantly in one another as we shift from day to day to maintain and evolve into the potential that we were created to be. I have a wonderful friend, Pastor Gary Johnson of Bible Tabernacle Church in Lancaster, New York. And we've shared many of what we call fireside chats, a cup of coffee and an hour of our time. And I'm always, in all of those interesting conversations, I'm always reminded of his words that we're a work in progress and a finished work at the same time. When we were born, the package was complete. A little baby that comes out, it has the potential in it and all the seeds to become everything that it will ever become. It's a perfect package. And yet, you know, it's mind-boggling because it's also a finished work. It's in the work of the progress where we get to walk it out because we need to have opportunity to apply free will. So our challenge here is total surrender, getting to choose that every single day. And as our recovery moves on, so does the depth of our spiritual involvement. In step 7, begin to humbly ask God to remove our shortcomings. And 4, it was tough enough to look at them, to remove them, to get rid of them, to, you know, be careful how and what you ask God for, because the spiritual principle is pretty obvious. It's humility. To try to be able to set pride aside, pride has a deep root. Sometimes such a difficult thing to do because we generally don't see pride in ourselves. Sometimes we go over the other extreme and our humility even denies our pride. It just means being neutral, letting go of the need to place yourself above others. And sometimes if you have the guts, ask somebody that's close by you, what do they see in you? Do they see pride or do they see humility? So we continue sliding from 7 into 8 so that we can see our way to begin making a list of those people that we had harmed and became willing to make amends. Well, to amend is to put it right. We have to be willing to ask for forgiveness and willing to forgive yourself. Forgiveness isn't always easy. A lot of times when I have clients, whether they're couples or family members, it works for everybody. I tell them there's always 3 parts to forgiveness. Whenever you've done something that has offended or hurt somebody else, I usually say that, number 1, you want to ask, will you forgive me? Because if you ask them, they have the ability to say yes or no. It means that if they say yes, then they can be held accountable. And so those 3 parts of forgiveness is, the first one, we don't bring it back up to them again. I don't remind the offender about the offense. And then number 2 is I don't tell other people about it. I don't keep rehashing it over and over to others. And actually, you know, I've had lots of opportunity to hear some of the things that people say about others, and I call it downright slander. But number 3 is when it comes up into our own minds, Once we've forgiven, we can't give it any energy. We have to be willing to forgive. Forgiveness wasn't made for somebody else. It was made for us. And this makes its way back to our belief system in both arenas again. Funny how it keeps coming back. How we cared and currently cared for ourselves and our responsibility designates whether we'll feel sorry for ourselves or we continue to harbor guilt and regrets both internally and externally. We come back to the validity of our admittance in step 1 through acknowledging our part in accepting accountability in creating healthy pathways to wholeness, asking for and giving back, the spiritual principle of reciprocity, reaping and sowing. Sometimes it's not so easy to find success in step 9 because the spiritual principle in it is discipline. Who likes to hear that one? John 15, it says, if you love me, keep my commandments. And because addiction is a disease of more, we're not the best at having self-control on our own. And addiction holds self-control bondage, and it keeps us in a place of arrested development. In our faith-based recovery, we can rely on God, who is all-powerful, to help us stay away from the temptation, even if I can't do it myself. I realized along the way that all things are possible with God. Success really is possible. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Persist in an activity or process. The spiritual principle here, Paul suggested, is the key to determination. In 1 Corinthians 9:24, know ye not, they that which run in a race run all, but one receiveth the prize. So run that ye may obtain it. Man, oh man. I have to run like I'm going to win. A reward in step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God. Conscious contact. Praying only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out. Our life begins to take on a new balance for us. And as we trade out those things that hurt with healthy choices, feelings, opinions, behaviors, man, oh man, my belief systems start to change. And then having had that spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other addicts and to practice those principles in all our affairs. Spiritual principle here, the ability to put faith into action and service, the ability to give back is called generosity, gratitude. And man, oh man, can gratitude change a life. So we start to see all of these spiritual principles and how they're moving and shaping our lives. And so we have to really start planning a personal path to recovery so that we can have success. And destiny's path is set and the journey is ours. You know that saying, and so many people have claimed credit for it, yet they really say nobody really knows where it came from, but it says watch your thoughts, for your thoughts become your words. Watch your words, for your words become your deeds. Watch your deeds, because your deeds become your habits. Watch your habits, because they become your character. Be careful for your character, because it becomes your destiny. There's a resource. I have a friend, Dr. Leland Jones. He's a Christian psychiatrist. And actually, he's an author of a soon-to-be-released book called The Wholeness Handbook. And he's got some real good suggestions and therefore keys to destiny development. If you're interested in reading about his 40-year career in both worlds, Christian and secular, he's got a really interesting story. You can check out at ihno.org, and we can help you get that book. It's a comprehensive Christian perspective on mental, physical, and spiritual wholeness. He was an MD before he stepped into psychiatry. So it gives him a kind of interesting perspective on things. So checking our character to the spiritual principles really needs opportunity to show growth. Just as in the example earlier about the movie, initiative creates accomplishment, and accomplishment creates initiative. Well, there's three, and it depends on how you want to look at them, whether you want to look at them as challenges, battles, or opportunities. The first one that you're going to face could be every day, sometimes more than one of these at a time. The first one is the enemy. All the enemy has to do is just kind of make his way by and just whisper something in your ear like, you know, you deserve that. He doesn't have to swear. He doesn't have to make up stories. He just got lots of one-liners that just put doubt into your mind. And a lot of times our patients, clients, participants, whatever we call them, they're challenged just by hearing those messages. The second one is the world, because the world keeps reinforcing that lifestyle of it's out there and you can have anything that you want to have. You know, there's only 4 or 5 different types of marketing techniques and how to get people to do what it is that you want them to do. And people go to school and they study that all the time. And we end up becoming puppets to these puppeteers. And sometimes the hardest thing is cutting somebody's puppet strings so that they can become themselves and make their own choices and live their own lives. And then, of course, the last challenge, that one's ourselves. Sometimes we can be the hardest. Sometimes we can be our own worst enemy. Well, Christ-based recovery works. And having Christ in a day-to-day relationship as we apply biblical application to the matters of the mind, body, and soul, habits and behaviors, victory is promised. The Bible tells us that we do not have to be a master to sin anymore, and that we can be more than conquerors over those things that hold us in bondage. We have what it takes to turn these millstones placed in our path into stepping stones and even milestones. We can break the cycle and be free indeed. Thank you for allowing me to share in your day. We can take questions if you like. Are you with me, Gina?
Hey, Donna. So I just wanted to, there was a question that came up. It looks like, what is the difference between this and Celebrate Recovery is one of the questions. Can you respond to that?
Celebrate Recovery was created by Rick Warren out of Saddleback Church, and it is a faith-based program. Many of the faith-based programs are basically the same. They will follow biblical spiritual principles, just sometimes the formats are different. And the format may be whether they pray before, whether they sing some songs before their meeting. Just some of the different programs will do a different format, but the principles are the same. Great question.
Great. So another question that came up is, how do you navigate integrating these principles with a client who doesn't have a Christian faith?
Even though somebody might not have a Christian faith, they still understand words like surrender and integrity. Most people will have faith in something, and usually the hardest part about working with somebody is taking a snapshot to see exactly where their faith is at. And sometimes when I have a client come in, and my very initial time with them, I will ask them, is faith important? Is faith something that they have? And maybe even, where did they get their faith? And some of them will say, my mom took me to church every week. And some of them will say, well, you know what? I was in a foxhole during the Vietnam War, and I prayed out and yelled, oh, God. Well, that at least tells me that they know a little bit about God. If they were willing to call him in a time of trouble, then they've got a little bit of faith. I hope that helps.
Thank you. That's great. Someone else has asked, how do you engage someone who is struggling with believing in God or Jesus Christ, who has been hurt in the past by the church or a religious organization?
Another challenging opportunity. A couple days ago, I had a 16-year-old young man come in, and it was interesting. I saw right from the get-go that he had something that was going on, because usually people pay at the window before they come on into the session. They take care of that out in the reception area. And he said, no, if that's okay, I'd rather pay at the end. Well, I'll tell you right there, I knew that he was ready to dart if possible. So I said, you know what, you can pay whenever you want to pay. And so we came on into the office, and he started to share. And I said, can I go ahead and pray? And just a little opening prayer. He said, you're not going to do that God thing, are you? And I said, well, you know what? I said, I just want to pray for me for just a moment so that I can be the best that I can be for you today. Is that okay? He said, yeah. So I just did Lord, just help me to be able to do and say what I need to, and give me the wisdom, Lord. Thanks for bringing Buddy here. And so as we were talking, and he said, his mom's in rehab right now. And then his dad just died 3 months ago. This kid doesn't know whether he's coming or going. And I said, in thinking about his response earlier, I said, you must be really, if I was in your position, I'd be probably pretty angry at God about all of this. And he said, I am. He said, oh, well, that's going to show me he does know about God. And how can I help him to know and to break down that anger? Because it wasn't God that put his mom into rehab. It wasn't God who killed his dad. It was a fallen world and people's choices. And so once he was kind of able to see some of that, I said, you know, I had a girl come in one day and she said, you know, I'm so angry at God. I said, well, why is that? She said, he killed my sister. I said, he killed your sister? How did he do that? She said she was standing at the corner and a drunk driver jumped right over the curb and killed her. I said, well, I don't know if I'd say that God did that, because it wasn't God who got behind the wheel of the car. It was somebody who chose to drink. It was really the drunk driver who killed your sister. And I'm so sorry for that. Well, sometimes people want to blame what they don't understand. And if you only know God an inch high, then that's all you can love him. But the more we start to know about him, the bigger that we can understand. Hope that helped.
Thank you, Donna. So that is the last of our questions for today's webinar. I want to take the opportunity and thank all of you for staying on and listening to this outstanding webinar. The feedback that we're getting through the questions is very positive. Just be sure to complete your evaluation form so that you can receive your certificate of completion. Again, on behalf of Lakeview Health, I'd like to thank Dr. Donna Potter for facilitating this very unique webinar experience. The PowerPoint will be available for folks. I know we've received a couple of questions about having access to her PowerPoint. We'll be sure to get you a copy of the PowerPoint so that you can use it as a resource. And if you have any questions and you need to reach out, Donna, I didn't see anywhere on your slides where people might want to get in touch with you. So if people had questions or wanted to talk with you directly, do you have a number that they can reach out to?
Sure do. It would be area code 716-464-3681, or you can send it through the website, donna@ihno.org, and be happy to receive any of your messages.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, everyone. We hope you have a blessed day. Thank you, Donna.